Some of you guys we remember from one of our previous classes. We thank you all so much for joining us and asking for us to come and be with you all tonight. Tonight, we're going to talk about building resilience, bouncing back during difficult times. My name is LaDonna Sanders, and I will be one of your co-facilitators for this evening. Myself and Miss Shannon Bell are the co-owners of Belladonna Education and Consulting Services. Currently, I work full-time in Fairfax County as a social worker. I have been in the field for over 13 years, and I am a parent of one child plus many bonus children. Yeah, I have a whole bunch of bonus children. My co-facilitator, Miss Shannon Bell, works as a school counselor in the Northern Virginia area.
I do.
She's also the parent of one daughter.
Yeah, or
Belle, would you like to share anything else about yourself?
Oh, I'm just excited to be sharing with you guys tonight, and I hope that you walk away with some useful information about just how to deal with difficult times.
So we are a pretty interactive group. We like to really interact with our participants. So please utilize the chat feature or the raise your hand feature if you have a question that you would like to ask us. We are more than willing to answer questions during the presentation. I'll pay attention to the chat, and as additional people come in, I'll also be admitting them. Tonight's agenda is on the board, and we will first start off with a definition of what resilience is. We'll move into how to build a resilient mindset, maintaining a routine of self-care, and we'll close out with exploring coping strategies and building resiliency in children. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Ms. Bell, and she's going to do a quick grounding exercise.
So one of the nice things that I like about virtual learning is we have started just pulsing the group. How are we doing? So you can either in the chat feature below, choose a feeling in any of those zones and put it in the chat feature about how you're feeling presently. Or you can, if you click up at the top bar, you'll see an annotate button, and you can click on the annotate button and pick a stamp, and you will be able to place your stamp on the feeling. So I could say, oh, well, currently I am feeling very grateful to be sharing with you guys tonight, and I can put my stamp on grateful. So if you just take a minute and either in the chat feature or on the actual screen annotate, how are we feeling?
So what is resilience? We took some time to really find definitions that we thought that would really be meaningful to the conversation today. And so the two that we came up with was resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties or change. It's adapting in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, or threats. And then spiritual resilience is the ability to sustain oneself and self-purpose through a set of beliefs, principles, or values while encountering adversity, stress, and trauma by using internal and external spiritual resources.
Computer doesn't want to go to the next screen. So you might be thinking, well, how do I build a resilient mindset? So we came up with a couple of ideas of how you can start building a more resilient mindset. So we want to remember that challenges and distress usually only last a short time. So putting things in perspective. I know when we're in something, we often wonder if it's ever going to end or when it's going to end, but know that usually challenges only last a short period of time in the broader spectrum of things. Although we might think that the coronavirus pandemic has lasted 10, 11 months now, in perspective of a lifetime, that is still a short period of time. And we will get through it, and viewing, mistakes and failures as lessons learned. Oftentimes while we're in things, we don't recognize what the lesson was, but when we come out of things, we can look back at it and figure out, what did I learn from that? How do I prevent making that same mistake next time? You also want to have an awareness of what you say to yourself during times of distress. And we'll go more into this in the next couple of slides. Our thoughts really affect our actions and behaviors as well as our mood. When we're in challenging times, we often place blame on ourselves or others for the challenges that we're facing. So we must stop placing blame on ourselves or others. And we need to practice gratitude and positivity. I know sometimes it's difficult to find the positive in challenges, but if we take a step back and we look at it, usually we're able to find something positive. So those last three, we're actually going to go more in depth in the next couple of slides.
So one of the ways to continue to build a resilient mindset is being aware of our thoughts and feelings. What we found in the research as we prepared, we understood one of the thing that kept sort of resonating through all of the research. It talked about how what we think affects how we feel. What we do affects how we think and feel, and that what we feel affects what we think and do. And so there's a cyclical sort of process in terms of how our brain sort of functions in our thinking and thought process. And so if you're thinking about, being mindful about your thoughts impact your behavior, and your behaviors impact your emotions, and then it continues to go around in a cyclical process.
So to give you an example, if you're thinking that we're never going to get through this, then your emotion might be discouraged or stressed or anxiety. And then your behavior might reflect that. Maybe you're withdrawn from your family and friends. Maybe you don't enjoy the activities that you normally would participate in. And so therefore it's this triangle of all those things are interconnected. So if we change the mindset to be more positive and to think more positively, then those other two things will change as well, the emotions and the behavior. We also want to think about things that are in our control and those things that are outside of our control. So oftentimes when we are stressed or anxious about things, we have to think about, are they things that I can change? Can I change the actions and the behaviors of others? Can I change how long something will last? Can I change how other people will react to things? And those aren't things that we can change, but I can change my attitude and how I think about things. I can change my behavior and what I do if I follow, the guidelines set forth. I can choose how much social media or news I channel myself into. And I can also choose finding activities that I enjoy and things that I can do at home. So really taking a step back and thinking about the things that I can control versus the things that I can't control will often lower your stress.
So right now we're going to take a moment. We're going to have some participation from the audience. As Ms. Bell is preparing, we are going to, we have a poll question to ask you guys.
And being inside of our home it's created a lot more family time. I think that even for me, I think before we got so bogged down into our daily activities that it was hard to stop and really focus on my family and spending intentional time, with my husband and child. And this has forced me to do that. And then we see words like cooking, togetherness, communication, conversations, love, connection. And then we see, you know, words like putting in perspective racism and different belief systems, and that it's wrong. So those are the things that we've looked at in this time of, you know, the pandemic and social unrest. I challenge you, and we just talked about some positive things that you feel have come out of this time, is really think about what has gone well, or what have you improved on, or who has helped you along on this journey. So thinking about gratitude. I really appreciate LaDonna because not only is she my co-facilitator of our educational consulting business, but she's a really good friend of mine, and we just enjoy spending time together and being on this journey together. So really letting people know how they have helped you along this journey and just getting through. You know, there are people that I can just pick up the phone and call at any day or time, and they'll be right there with me, just even if it's just listening. And then challenging yourself to each day think of 3 things that are positive that you're grateful for. And this has been a really big one for me coming into the new year. I don't really do New Year's resolutions, but this year I did force myself to buy a journal and a planner, and I'm being very intentional about writing the goals that I have for myself and what I'm grateful for. And it's actually really helping. Like yesterday was a really rough day for me, and I can't even tell you why, but it just started off on the bad foot. And I really last night sat down and was intentional about writing the 3 things that were positive out of my day yesterday, although I thought it was a disaster. And that really helped me center myself and really look at the bigger picture, that there were good things that came out of my day, although I thought the whole day was a disaster.
One of the things that has really helped for me during the pandemic and sort of keeping me sane is creating opportunities for self-care. I probably do more self-care now than I was doing prior to the pandemic because I'm really being intentional about it. I'm spending much more time at home, much more time managing work. My son, I'm trying to continue to incorporate spiritual aspects into my daily life. And so one of the things that I have felt that's been important with myself and with my son is establishing routines. Maintaining the routines help decrease stress and anxiety. It helps him know what's coming next. It helps me plan out sort of my day so that I can have some baseline around the things that understanding around the things that I need to get done. Exercising regularly, that's one of those things that I'm still trying to, do on a consistent basis. Every year I continue to say I'm going to do it more and more and more. But right now I'm starting off with just walking. We try to go outside, a couple of days a week. Either he's on a bike or I'm just walking, but just making sure that you exercise regularly. Not only is it important for your mental health, it's also important for your body. So it's recommended that you do something at least 30 minutes a day. Walk, run, do yoga, playing with your children. We wrestle a lot. We blow balloons up and hit them across the room and, run around and have dance parties. We had a virtual dance party with some friends a couple of weeks ago. That was really great. Maintaining a healthy diet, stay hydrated. It's really important to drink water. It's really important to be mindful that as we have things to do, and yes, our to-do list continues to get longer. It's really important to make sure that we have balanced meals and keep healthy snacks on hand to avoid stress eating. Next slide, please. Get sleep and rest. Stress gets amplified when you don't get enough sleep. It's important. It's recommended that there's a recommended amount of sleep to help you stay focused on work and in managing your stress. Go to bed early. Take naps. I mean, I wished I had one today. Ms. Bell and I were talking about it there before we got started this evening. Like, I missed my nap today. I should have taken that time, because normally I don't get a chance to do it during the day because I'm working. And so today I should have took that time. Taking breaks. We definitely took a lot of breaks today when the snow came. Those flurries, I didn't know what was going to happen today, but it was great to look out the window and just really see, marvel at it and try to count the amount of snowflakes that was happening. They were coming down fast. But doing things like competing puzzles, board games, a quick project, folding laundry, or even reading just a few pages out of a new book can all be part of your self-care routine.
Does anybody have any questions so far? All right, next we're talking about exploring coping strategies. And I know that there are many different coping strategies out there, but in doing some research, the best coping strategies that providers are giving people whenever they're under stress and anxiety are grounding. So if you see the poster, grounding looks like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can feel, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. And then taking 3 slow, deep breaths. And that really centers you and brings you back to the present. It also will override some of those continuing thoughts that you may have in your brain, because then you'll be focused on, okay, what do I see? What do I feel at this moment? The next one is mindfulness. And oftentimes people think of mindfulness as sitting with your your legs crossed and humming. That's not what mindfulness is. Mindfulness is really centering your breath, taking deep breaths. It also could be, me and my daughter like to take mindful walks. And so we'll take a walk and we'll point out the things that we see or hear. It could be yoga and exercising, and guided meditation is one of them. So it's really anything that you can do to recenter yourself and use any one of your 5 senses. And then the next one is journaling. Like I said, that's one thing that I have I used to do it, so I guess reintroduced to myself as a way to channel, some of the anxiety and stress that I have, and being intentional and mindful about writing down things and how I'm feeling, being like what I'm hopeful for, what I'm grateful for, and just positive daily reminders. Even if it's just writing down a quote that you want to focus on for the week and going back to that quote each morning or each evening and centering yourself that way.
Did anyone have other coping strategies that they use that they would like to share? Okay. So social supports, we ask, this part is probably one of the biggest ones. It's really important to connect with others. Reach out to family members, friends, colleagues. Right now, everyone is on social media. There's so many group apps that people are using, but make phone calls, be intentional about FaceTime. Sometimes, one of the things, I know that there was a period where I was like, I don't think I've talked to anybody in a week. Like, I really need to call somebody. And so, just being mindful that we still need to stay connected to each other. reach out and ask for support. There are a lot of social groups that are coming up on social media as well. Connect with your religious groups and any specialized support groups that are needed to help you through this difficult time. This last slide talks about ways that you have coped with challenges in the past. And so what we talk about here is that during difficult and challenging times, sometimes we forget that we've already endured difficulties previously, some challenges that we've already been able to overcome. And so it's important to really think about and practice positive self-talk. It helps to cope with current challenging times. What lessons have you learned from previous mistakes? And remind yourself of your strengths. Think about how you have healed from previous trauma.
And I think one thing that me and Ms. Sanders had talked about when we were putting together the presentation is that oftentimes when we haven't healed from past trauma, when we enter another difficult season, that might trigger us, and maybe it's compounded. So we have that previous trauma and then we have more trauma. So that leads us to feel more stress or more anxiety. So we really need to focus on maybe during down periods, healing that previous trauma. And sometimes that might be, do we need to seek out additional mental health support? And that is okay. Maybe you want to talk to a counselor. Maybe you want to talk to your pastor at church, and really digging deep within inside yourself to heal that trauma so that they don't compound on top of each other each time you face a difficult time. So I know we've spent a lot of this evening talking about how we can build resilience as adults, but there's also ways that we can build resilience in our children as we are on a journey to build resilience in ourselves. So a couple of the things are build their self-esteem. We talk about growth mindset versus fixed mindset, and really focusing on how your child has learned and how they've grown, and what growth that they've made, instead of focusing on whether or not they're smart or capable, because we're all smart and we're all capable, maybe just in different ways. We also want to teach and model for them self-control. The more control they have over situations, the better they'll feel about themselves. And if they're able to calm down and regroup after difficult times, then they'll be able to carry that skill into adulthood. Connecting with others through, school and community. And I know right now it's hard, especially if you have school-age children and they're not in-person school. And how do we connect with others? And what do you feel comfortable with connecting for others? I know for myself, one thing that I've done is we reintroduced in-person gymnastics, because it was a social support that my child had before and that she needed to continue. And we found a place that was abiding by, COVID restrictions, and it's been great. She's been in since October with no issues. And I know Miss Sanders, her son was in swimming in the fall, just for that interaction and connecting, with others. So if you're able to find safe, positive ways for your child to connect and engage with others that you feel comfortable with, that's a great way to build resilience. Looking at goal setting and setting realistic expectations. I know one thing that we often talk about coming into the new year is, what goals do you have for yourself? And making sure that they're realistic. My daughter and I sat down because they did an activity at school about goals, and she had this large, lofty goal, and I want her to be successful. So we sat down and talked about how could we chunk that into smaller parts as something that was realistic for her to be able to do so that she would feel good about herself. Um, Also modeling optimistic thinking patterns, like we said, that triangle, how we think affects how we feel and how we behave, modeling that for your child and having them have that same mindset. Oftentimes, if she says that she's not good at something, like today she was practicing her gymnastics, and she kept saying failure, failure. And I'm like, but that's not a failure. We learn from our mistakes and we keep trying and move on. Just changing that mindset for her, that those setbacks are not failures. So being able to do that, with your own child. Teaching coping strategies as well. We talked about some coping strategies earlier, but being able to draw or color or do hands-on, like molding with Play-Doh, are good coping strategies for kids. So those are just some ways that we wanted to also put in your wheelhouse about how you can work with your children on building resiliency as well.
So now we just wanted to take the time to open up the floor for questions from you all. Anything that you've seen that's come up in your family that you might want to share with the group, or just ask Ms. Bell and I. The floor is yours. You all can either put your questions in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and go ahead and just ask your question or share your comment. Okay, so one question: how can we boost each other when it comes to resilience? I think with your peers, I think a lot of it is really sort of giving kudos when you know that they've done something well, if they've been involved in something, really sort of sending text messages or having in conversation, you're talking about, that really took courage. I mean, people are having some really difficult conversations around race, around trauma, around, what things you can do with your children during the pandemic, because most people are, how many times can you, go to the playground safely, how many walks? And so really just sharing those kinds of things with each other, and really if you, I go by the model sort of, if you see something, say something. And so it's almost like we do with children when we say we caught you being good. Like, I'm always trying to really encourage my friends and talk with them about the things that they are doing well, and highlighting those things, whether or not they're opening new businesses and things like that. And so I'm sharing that information with their permission on social media, or directing other people to go and sort of explore their business for additional information. So those are some ways that come to mind. Ms. Bill, can you think of anything else?
I think that was good. We have another question. When you hit a time when a child just won't be flexible, do you have a good idea to shift them out of this stance? Usually what I have found is helpful in this time is to redirect their attention to something else. So if you want them to do something and they're just not being flexible, within your realm of control or what you feel comfortable with, usually if you can shift their attention to something else, maybe another preferred activity or that you feel comfortable and you're okay with, that's usually what works. Also, I mean, there's some de-escalation techniques and kind of talking through things. Like if they're at baseline, it depends on, I would say, how inflexible they are and where we are at kind of on a scale. If it's just, no, I'm not going to do that, well, let's talk about it. But if it's, no, I'm not going to do that, and I'm throwing a tantrum, and that's when I would say kind of if we could shift their mindset to something else that you feel comfortable with. Usually when my child is like that, sometimes I'm just like, would you like a hug? and just that physical connection with me works and will really pull her kind of out of that inflexibility. So really knowing, you know, what you're comfortable with, or the child that you're working with, what they would like. My daughter is really into connection, so that usually works for us. If I just, would you like a hug right now? Or if I tickle her or something, then usually she's like, oh, okay.
No, I was just going to add on to this really quick. One of the other things I think is just really important to not get into power struggles. You know, power struggles really lead to additional tantrums and sometimes can lead to additional stretches in their mood and affect. And so one of the ways, like Miss Bell mentioned, is we blow kisses. And so if he is, you know, getting upset, he likes my little fast kiss. And so I just blow him a kiss and then sort of lay it on his cheek, because he also likes the connections. But also just being mindful, like, is what I need him to do something that has to happen right at this moment? And so if, as a parent, I can say, you know what, he wants those 5 goldfish. We just gonna give those 5 goldfish, because what is the harm? Have those 5 goldfish with your pancakes. Yeah, with your pancakes for breakfast, you know? And so it's not worth it today for this power struggle. Here's your 5 goldfish and the pancakes. As long as you eat them both, we're good.
And I think also about offering choices. If you feel comfortable offering, you know, 2 or 3 choices, if they're being inflexible, or what I'll say, if it's something that I really need her to do, I'll let her pick the order that she's able to do it. So it still gets done, and it's still, but she has some power and control. And I think oftentimes that's what it is when children are being inflexible. It's just they want to have that power and control. So how can we give them that power and control that we are reasonably comfortable with? And I like what Maggie wrote. She just starts reading a book out loud.
I would say you can start really early. Kids are always watching. They're always watching adults and their caretakers. And so even at 1 or 2, one of the things that we want children to be able to do is to be able to make mistakes and be able to problem solve and critically think for themselves. And so when they knock over that cup of juice because they've thrown the ball and things like that, one of the things that you can, you know, really do in that moment is use it as a teachable moment to demonstrate that it's okay to make mistakes. Yes, mommy and daddy may be upset, but we're going to clean it up. Can you help me clean it up? And sort of kind of move on. There's some conversation, some dialogue based on their developmental level, but I really think it can start really even at the age of 1. You know, you want your children to be able to come and learn at an early age that they can make a mistake and feel comfortable to tell you that they've made a mistake. And you're teaching them as a parent sort of how to bounce back from making those mistakes. So they're always watching. And so we should always be modeling.
And I think that there are a lot of good picture books that help with this from the beginning. Maybe it's just the counselor in me, but we've done books about emotions, and my daughter knew feeling words, you know, from the time that she could talk, and she could tell me how she was feeling because it was something that we were constantly talking about and reading about. So there are some really good picture books out there that will help too. There are picture books about like breathing techniques that I find are wonderful. In kindergarten last year, my Breathe Like a Bear book was amazing. And that's how I would start all of my classes last year. So there are lots of, you know, good resources, even for younger kids, that are out there to help kind of build this resiliency. One thing that we've added to our wheelhouse this year is really talking about growth mindset. And because often my daughter will say that she can't do something, or like I said today, she'll say things like failure. And I'm like, but that's not how it is. So really adding books about like growth mindset. And there are some wonderful children's books that are out there on those topics as well. And it says, it feels like parents don't have much of a break from their children. So it's hard. It's hard for them to be resilient. Are there any good words to use when parents just need to reset so that they can be resilient for their children? I think this is a wonderful question because this is something that I really have had to work on during the pandemic. So from the beginning of the pandemic until October, my husband was working almost 7 days a week, and I was never getting a break. We were together 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so I would tell my daughter, we just need a break. And can you go to your room and read? And I'm going to go to my room and read, and then we'll come back in 20 minutes. Or I would just go and I'd be like, okay, I'm going to take a shower or a bath and just go have, my time, because I think that as a parent, it's important that we reset ourselves so that we can be better for them. So now that he's not working on the weekends, I take self-care Sunday. And even if that means I get in my car by myself, by myself, stop at Starbucks and go grocery shopping without having to worry about somebody pulling something that we don't need off the shelf or having to get somebody in and out of the car. So I think that it is important that you just find that time and I just explain, like, I'll be back in a little bit. I just need a short break and I'll come back. And I come back and we give hugs and kisses and we say that we missed each other. And then I feel refreshed and she feels good too. And we're able to move on with our week and function, and we're great. So I think it's important that I'm glad that came up, because I really do think it's important for people, as parents, that we take that time out for ourselves.
And to be able to teach it to your children, you can use some of the words that we use with them, like, hey, I need a timeout. Mommy needs a break. I'm not sure if the kids are into, Daniel Tiger, but, Daniel Tiger has that grr, angry. And he says he takes a breath. He needs to take a breath and count to 4. And so, as he demonstrates. And so being able to, sort of model and sort of use some of the language that they're using. And then we talk a lot about in our presentations about grace. And so sometimes when I get into a space, because his behavior is, can be a bit much, in my head, my word for myself is give yourself grace, give yourself grace, give yourself some grace, give him some grace. And so really sort of just utilizing those positive affirmations, those positive opportunities to take those breaks that you need to take, and the opportunities to really say, you know what, that really made me upset. Giving them the language that, they need as they're continuing to develop, to describe what their feelings are, to communicate to you what it is that they're feeling, and then to jointly be able to problem solve with you as the adult in terms of what they need to do next to keep themselves safe and to also keep yourself safe.
Let's see. How much of your own emotions, feelings, anxiety are healthy to share with your kids, and how much should you sort of deal with without letting them know? Do you want to take that? Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I think, my son is not, he's 3. And so with my older nieces and nephews, I'm really asking them how are you feeling? Tell me about, what you're thinking about, what's the thing that they've heard that sort of gets them into this place. If you're upset, I think it's really good to just acknowledge that you're upset. You don't necessarily have to give them full details. Just say, mommy heard something on the TV, or, auntie heard something on the radio mommy heard something on the radio that really made her, happy today. And so I think sort of sharing what you think develop in the developmental space that they're in, and what is appropriate.
my daughter is a little bit older, so we often at night, share how we are feeling. And there is a level of, because she's able to communicate her feelings. I don't share that I'm anxious, but I will say, like, I'm worried about such and such, or this thing happened and it didn't make me feel good. So she's able to tell me how she's feeling as well, if something went well, if something didn't go well. So I think that, depending on developmental level of your child, it is healthy to share how you're feeling, because then it also teaches them that it's okay for them to share how they're feeling as well. And then if there are stronger feelings and emotions that you need to share, again, that's reaching out to your support system to, talk those additional things through. And then we have a question about, do you have any good ideas for dealing with siblings being at home together, more bickering, arguing, and lock the door?
Lock the door was a response to when you said you go take a shower.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And then in thinking about more things opening up, my daughter is very stressed when we're not together. Do you have thoughts about helping her feel safe away from us? Okay, so 2 questions. So how do you deal with sibling rivalry? It sounds like, being together a lot. I could see that. And I would say the counselor perspective would be getting to the root of, why they're arguing. I know that they're spending a lot of time together. Everybody is in the house, but maybe giving them, oftentimes sibling rivalry is about competing for attention. So making sure that you're giving them each individualized attention whenever you're able to. And really getting them to sit down and talk it out and problem solve together. I'm not sure how, I think you have littles. So, but I think
that 3 and 5.
3 and 5. So I would say, giving them their separate time apart, getting them to engage together during baseline times when they're both happy. And then showing them whenever they do have those times that they were able to work it out and they were able to play nicely together, and how can we get back to that point, and really problem solving and working together and having them really kind of orchestrate it so it doesn't feel like something that is forced upon them. Because I know a lot of it is, we are spending more time together and we don't have time outside of, where we would normally get a break from each other. So how can we create that space within our home? And maybe, your husband taking one and you taking one, and having that separate time together, and then everybody coming together and really talking about and setting some expectations and some structure, and upfront talking about consequences. Like, if you're going to continue to bicker and argue, these are the consequences that are going to happen, and make sure that you're consistent and follow through with those. And have them come up with them.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, along those lines too, when my son has people over, we set up playstations, and so that way that it is enough separation for the two of them. They can be in the same room, but I set up separate playstations so that somebody, and then there's like a little timer. Once the timer goes off, then you switch, and then there's, at the end, there is sometimes I do it in the middle of the 4 stations, or sometimes I wait till the end. There is an activity that they do together. So they end up sort of also learning to do something together and as individuals.
There was one day we have a mat that my sister gave them, like a gymnastics mat. And I literally took that and put that in the middle of the room and said, here's yours and here's yours. No, don't cross the line.
Don't cross the line. And I think that it's important that this is where we kind of build in that resilience and teach them the feeling words and the I statements so that they're better able to communicate how they're feeling, because there's always an underlying behavior or feeling there, and really getting to the root of what that underlying, behavior or feeling is important. So teaching them to communicate how they're feeling, or maybe, what that person did, how it affected them, so that they can really hear it. And I think 3 and 5 is a good age to start teaching that skill.
We talk about when we are at home or together, my 1-year-old gets very upset when I leave the room or feels the need to be on my hip. I find it's more now when we are at home rather than when we are at school. How can I find a solution for that? I would say at 1, it's really appropriate. They're in that sort of, sometimes they're still in that separation anxiety period where they're just really not able to navigate and really they're really understanding and get a better understanding that even though you're going to go away, that you are going to come back. And so I think at that age, it's an appropriate space to be in. What I would say is really what I would suggest is doing what Ms. Bell talked about a little bit. If you're able to sort of said it's happening more at home. Yeah, if it's happening at home, I would say if there's another caretaker where you're able to sort of have them be the caretaker and you're off for a little bit of time, and then being able to come back and sort of say, see, mommy, and sort of making it a big deal that you've returned. I think that is one of the strategies that I would try to implement, even if it's just for short periods of time, but just having another sort of person be the caretaker and then coming back and celebrating the fact that you've come back and that they were okay and that you did well, and a lot of hugs and kisses and things like that. And if there's been changes in routines, just being mindful that it may just be an adjustment that they need to make, because there's a shift in the routine, and that's sort of why there is the additional attachment. Would like to say on behalf of Ms. Bell and I, thank you all again for joining us this evening. We are so excited to continue to be a partner with you all in parenting, and look forward to continuing to see you guys for future trainings. If you're on social media, we have a private Facebook group. And so it's Belladonna Education and Consulting. Feel free to like our page, and you'll be able to stay up to date on new trainings and seminars that we have coming.